This is Aaron Squire. I'm coming to you guys from GenCON 2014 with Drew Walker, the guy that's in charge of walking all over people with Drew's Walker, stomping them down. And I guess there's also a Drew's Fist out there.
It's Drew's Unrelenting Fist. That will be in set 2. Can't tell you what the card does, but eventually Drew is going to have an entire arsenal of weapons and machines, and hopefully someday have mechanical Drugans, because I love dragons. So hopefully that'll be a thing, but
Sweet.
Cannot confirm nor deny that it will be yet.
That's pretty awesome. So we're here in the Hex Pit where everyone is doing their tournaments, and they got the cards, you know. So you got your Broski Busk that you can win here. A lot of the streamers will probably be giving these away, and then everyone's got lots and lots of sleeves. You get these just for joining and playing. And then you got your Jovial Pipit. You're trying to get your play set of these if you're over here. So obviously you guys, we're going to put this out next week. So if you're at the con, I hope you stop by. Make sure to say hello to all the Hex crew. Say hello to myself. And we got a ton of PVE questions that I wrote out. And Drew's going to be good enough to talk as much as he can about these. In fact, we haven't really gotten a lot of interviews with Drew because he's a talker. Okay, he apparently he's a little bit dangerous, so we might actually get more than what they want us to know. What has changed in PvE since last year besides the Mercenaries? There was a huge change to Mercenaries we had, so like design-wise, can you talk about any changes from last year to this year that you guys have made where you're just like, oh, this just doesn't work?
Trying to remember from a year ago.
I mean, yeah, I am asking a lot. So I mean, if you can't think of something, I mean.
No, I mean the dungeons went through a pretty big overhaul. We've been working on them a lot lately to try to get them to be fun, have potential variance in them, so that every time you go through them, they're different. We added the might system. I forget exactly when we added the might system, but that changed.
The might system.
The might system, which is Corey at Gamescom just showed that off a little bit.
Okay.
Which is basically. Your class will have 6. Right now, your class can level up 6 times inside of a dungeon. When you get to level 2, so you do your first fight. Once your first encounter is over, you'll typically level up, and that will give you a choice between one of 2 things. Then when you get to level 3, you get a passive power. When you get to level 4, you have another choice. When you get to level 5, you'll have another passive. When you get to level 6, you'll have another. It's called your capstone. You'll have another choice. So potentially there's 8 different combinations in that system that you can decide to spec differently for each dungeon that you go into, depending on the class that you are.
It feels a lot like a MOBA then, a little bit. Yeah, very much like that, where you got your ult.
That system is inspired a bit by the MOBAs of for League of Legends and Dota and all that stuff of, you know, how do you want to level your class up, and every time you do it, you know, in MOBAs you pretty much end up the same way, but the gear you buy in MOBAs, every game could be different depending on what role you're playing.
Right.
So depending on the dungeon you're in, depending on the deck you have, depending on what you're trying to do, maybe the dungeon's a little more puzzly, or you know, you need to spec slightly differently when you go in. We want to give you the option of having those choices available to you every time you go in a dungeon, and not make you set in stone.
Right.
Forever. So it's TCG. TCGs are very open-ended. We want to let you have that sandbox experience and make everything open for you.
Right. So talk to me about the main lore behind set 1 and set 2 respectively, and how this affects the new mechanics that we're going to see. We've seen a lot of new mechanics at the con, like adding on like extra charges. Charges getting used up a lot. Some extra stuff on the shin hair, and then dwarves are getting some love here. So talk to me about that. The
biggest mechanic for set 2 is called tunneling, which is mostly on pretty much, there's a couple of artifacts, but it's mostly on dwarfs and shin hair. Basically is you can pay a tunneling cost, which is 2 resources on every card. The cards will say tunneling 3, for example. So if you pay the tunneling cost, the card goes underground. Your opponent will know you have a tunneling card, but won't know exactly what it is, won't know at what point it's going to pop up. And if it's tunneling 3, it means 3 turns later it'll pop up and come into play. If it has a come into play power, that'll go off. So it lets you play guys to play troops that might be more expensive sooner. It lets you try to have some combo potentials, like, oh, I can't play these guys on the same turn if I was just going to play him regularly, but I can tunnel him, and then when he comes out, then I have this other card in my hand. I'm going to play that and set this combo to go off and have a lot of fun with it. And so a lot of the tunneling guys have come into play powers. And
also dodge extinction, which is kind of a big part of the metagame right now.
They can't be targeted or affected by murder, by any of that stuff. There may or may not be cards that will affect tunneling cards inside set 2 that will specifically call it out, but any of the regular targeting stuff will not work on the tunnel guys. So it gives you a little protection, and then gives you a chance to kind of get some guys out there that will let you combo off in the same turn that you might not have been able to do them with.
Like maybe a cave-in card for those tunneling.
Could be.
Guys.
Yeah.
Little guys.
So,
all right. So moving on. Will PvE have like an easy, medium, and hard mode to it?
The plan right now is to have hard modes available. We're still discussing how many different types of modes. For example, like the ones that have been thrown around are we have the Singleton Highlander, standard one of a card in your deck. That's an option. We've talked about letting you have go in with no equipment. We've talked about boss decks or decks in the dungeon.
The naked dungeon.
Yeah, the naked dungeon.
Yeah.
And we've talked about having boss decks, for example, in the dungeons being like, oh, this is how it is when it's normal. When you put on heroic mode or hard mode, they add, they add 8 new cards to the deck that are only in hard mode, and they're much more powerful and basically make the dungeon, at least some of the encounters in the dungeon, specifically the end bosses, different than what you were used to, more powerful than what you were used to.
Yeah.
So we haven't finalized on that yet, but there's a bunch of options throwing around because we want this to last for a long time. We want to offer players a challenge, but we also have to balance that with making sure that the ramp for new players is there and that it's not, for average guy, for casual guy, it's still got to be doable for that guy, but we don't want to make it so it's so easy that people just steamroll the whole thing and don't have a challenge.
Right, exactly. But the really hard stuff's going to be that raid content, right?
The raids, the multiplayer raids, those will be there to beat you down and challenge you, and you'll have to communicate with each other, build decks that probably work in sync together, and there's some interesting scenarios and cards that we're trying to work around and figure out, like Relentless Corruption, for example.
Love it.
Steals boss cards, and we're trying to decide how we want to handle those in raids, and if all 3 players that in a raid are playing 4 copies of Relentless Corruption, that might sort of be an interesting use of game mechanics, getting around some of the intended fun of the raid. So we have to figure out some of those things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, not to go back to Hearthstone again, but right now, the hard mode stuff, it's like they just make it unfair. That's all they do. They just make, oh, well, the computer can't beat you because it doesn't know how to play cards as well as you do. And so we're just going to, give it a head start and give it way more health than you. And that's somewhat artificial is how that feels. So, but I'm guessing we're not going to see that kind of artificiality at the beginning of a game necessarily.
No, the bosses, we want it to be clear that you're fighting a boss.
Right.
So a lot of the bosses might have more health than you do. They might draw more cards than you do. They might start with a bigger starting hand than you do. Because we want it to be clear, you're fighting a boss. This guy's more powerful than you, and so that when you do beat that boss, you're like, wow, he started off way better than me, and I beat him. And you feel a sense of accomplishment. But it isn't just a pure power, he's just, some bosses, they're playing probably cards that might be better than your cards.
Right.
And the end boss of the dungeon, of the campaign, of the storyline is no tricks, no gimmicks, just he is playing powerful cards and you just have to beat him.
Right.
And that's all there is to it. You might need a little luck on your side, you might have to tune your deck a little better, but there's no gimmicks, there's no tricks, it's you versus him, and that's all there is to it. And the best man, woman, child will come out on top.
So, are you worried at all about people botting PvE right now?
I'm not, but I'm not an engineer. So the engineers probably, if it becomes a thing, will build some stuff in. I actually have no idea how botting in a TCG would actually work. I know how it works in MMOs, but.
Well, I mean, it's basically they just run it for 24 hours, and then they just try to get as much gold as possible. And so I mean, if it's a really bad, maybe a 1 out of 10, they can actually finish it with the bot, then that's pretty bad. But if they can finish it 1 in 3, I'd say, then that could be a problem.
We'll keep an eye on all of that stuff. The systems guys are figuring out how much gold, how many pieces of equipment, how many cards, what's the give rate for all of that type of stuff, and the dungeons are, it's some of it's time investment. Like a dungeon that might be a little bit shorter the reward pool might not be as big,
Right. Well, that
because
makes sense.
you know, it's shorter, and we don't want people just saying, oh, it's a short one, oh, this is the half-hour dungeon, or this is the hour dungeon. That's shorter than some of the longer ones. I'm just gonna jam that one all day.
Yeah.
And then bots might just jam that one. And I think also some of the dungeons that might be shorter have a little more non-standard TCG stuff going on, which I have no idea how you're supposed to bot those things, because they don't function the way the regular
Right.
TCG games do.
You have to, yeah.
You actually probably have to play them.
Right.
But some smart guy out there might figure it out, but we'll have eyes on all that stuff and
Right.
tweak as necessary, so I'm not too worried.
So that kind of really segues us into our next thing. Right now, the only gold we've ever seen is like what we get from tournaments, because you guys are trying to test out those systems right
Yeah.
now. So like, how much gold per dungeon should we expect? Like, you know, maybe easy, medium, hard, or maybe per hour if we're doing pretty well. Do you have any type of numbers on that?
I don't have an exact number on it. Like we have an idea of what we want, and the arena will be the first. Will be the first.
Yeah, you're gonna design for this. So
yeah.
What's your target? Do you have a target? You guys have a target, but
the systems guys do. They know a lot better than I do. I mean, the arena is gonna be the first time where we get to see that stuff in action, and then we'll adjust from there. And again, like thankfully, because you know this is all digital, if things are a little out of whack, then we can easily tweak the system to fix that.
But the rates,
you know,
buff the rates. Yeah.
As some of it depends on how popular everything is. Like the more people that are playing PVE, potentially the more gold's flying around, and the you know, the more probably stable the economy is.
Virtual economy, yeah.
So if a lot of people are playing PvE like we suspect, then you know that will determine how much that the gold will be a certain way. Whereas if even more people are playing or even less people are playing, then we'll have to tweak the numbers to keep the economy healthy and make sure things are going as we want them to.
Right.
So.
Okay, so next one, is there going to be any type of penalty for like auto quitting? Like say like you're on the very first part of the dungeon, like obviously in the second and third part of the dungeon, if you quit, you have to do the first part, so that's already kind of a penalty.
Yep.
But like in the first part, like let's say I just don't like my opening hand, or I feel like I kind of want to steamroll it, and so like I'm just going to auto quit until I get the perfect hand. Anything that's going to stop that?
Most of the dungeons are set up in a way that like the first encounter is typically trying to show you what the dungeon's about, and honestly, in my opinion, if someone wants to auto quit out of that over and over again to just beat the first encounter, you know, that's on them. But you're not going to want to do that later, because then you're going to have to do everything again.
And more time.
We think right now that's that's enough time investment where people aren't going to want to just auto quit, you know, out of stuff because they got a bad hand or whatever the case is. Some people might, but I think the way the dungeons are set up right now, it's not really going to be a thing that we really have to worry about. So, but it is something, again, we're keeping an eye on. We've talked about, do we need to have lockouts? Do we need to have, you know, like some of the video games like WoW has, you know, you have your daily lockouts. We don't want to lock people from the content if we don't have to.
Right.
So we're trying to avoid all that stuff, because we just want you guys to play and have fun and enjoy yourselves.
It's a consideration, though. Yeah, if it needs to be done.
Yep, and you know, given that no one's done anything like this before, you know, we can look at other video games and look at mostly video games, and see what they've done. But this is a little different. It's a little different world. It's a little different. You know, in WoW you can run around and do all sorts of other stuff. It's like we lock you out of dungeons once you have done, you know, your dungeons for the day. What else are you supposed to do?
You want people to play.
We want you guys to grind and get those, and go looking for those hard to find pieces of equipment, those hard to get cards. We want you to be able to do that and have fun and do whatever you want.
Right. So next one, any clues on how crafting is going to work for us?
There's nothing set in stone, but crafting right now is more or less you'll get crafting drops from dungeons, and then that will let you craft. It's mostly cards right now, of all sorts of different types of rarities. Just like in a lot of the video games out there, you might need to get recipes. You can drop recipes that will let you craft specific cards. It can be items. You know,
maybe you could craft like a robot PVE champion or something. That would be fun.
There's no champions on board right now. It's mostly cards, but anything's an option.
Item that entices a champion to join you. You know, not a champion, but you know, like a
mercenary.
Maybe.
Anything. All that stuff is potentially there.
Right.
Right now, it's mostly cards that we have planned, but there's no reason why in the future that we can't craft equipment, we can't craft gems potentially, we can't craft champions, mercenaries. All that stuff is open. It's
Right.
just a matter of deciding if this is somewhere where we feel like it makes sense, if it's something we want to do.
Right. So along those lines, are you going to be able to craft rares and legendaries?
Again, the plan right now is there will be crafting cards of all sorts of rarities, and there will be rares, there will be legendaries that you can craft in that system. So it's pretty much the same with the PVE cards. They go across the whole rarity scheme, and the crafting cards do, and there's currently no reason why that shouldn't be the case.
Right. So we've already talked a lot about how it is that the first dungeon is going to be
the arena.
And so that kind of played into this question a little bit. Is what's the first real dungeon that we're going to see, or do you have any information on that? Is it going to be the Kraken that we keep seeing, or do you have any idea? What's the
I don't know exactly which dungeon will be first that people will be able to test. I know which one is planned to be the first dungeon. Well, the first non-sort of intro story dungeon that players will likely have access to, but again, we have to use them as a ramp-on point for new players. So the dungeon is mostly trying to show you what every single shard can do individually, and then decisions that you make inside the dungeon will determine which 2 shards the boss will play. So as you first go through it, it will be it's an intro experience, but we want to make it so that later on, when you need to go back and you need to farm it and you need to grind it out for your gear, the gear you get when you first go through it, because you're lower level, probably will mostly be common, uncommon stuff, but there'll still be rares and legendary equipment that you can get from there and cards. So when you go back when you're higher level, we want to make sure that the replayability is there and you don't just steamroll it. And the decisions you make inside the dungeon will determine which 2 shards the end boss decides to basically slap together and make a combo out of. And it also then helps show new players, hey, this is what every individual shard is about, and this is how you can combo them together if you put them together in a deck. So we're trying to use it as a teaching tool while also having this replayability and
like
stuff.
mono sharded decks first, and then
mono sharded decks to show off what each shard is kind of about, as far as the card pool that's available currently. And then at the end, depending on how you answer some questions in the dungeon, decisions you made, will determine which 2 shards that the end boss will then slap together and make a combo deck, a dual sharded deck out of. So.
All right. So on the equipment now, how many slots should we expect, and like what are they? Do you have off the top?
There's currently six slots. I believe it's trinket, weapon, armor, or sorry, not armor, helmet, chest, and gloves.
Right.
Is that 5 or 6? Trinket, weapon, helmet, chest, gloves, and boots. Those are the 6, and the cards are broken down in such a way that they have, every card has 2 pieces of equipment. They vary in which 2 they have.
You can only wear one.
You can only wear one.
You gotta make a decision.
I'm pretty sure every card doesn't make you decide if you want boots, this boot or this boot. So a card, for example, will have boot and a trinket, so that you can wear both, so that you can have 2 pieces of equipment for the same card. But then you have to decide, well, do I want this boot for this card, or do I want to wear this other boot for this other card?
Right.
But we want you to be able to use both pieces of equipment for the cards if you want to. So a lot of the equipment works with the individual card, and then if you have both pieces of equipment, works together to make an even cooler,
just
more
max
robust
it out.
card. We want you to be able to do that. So
max it out.
Yep.
All right. So will mercenaries ever get equipment? Maybe a single slot for a mercenary only equipment? Maybe in the future.
Probably, possibly. We haven't. It's the way mercenaries work right now. I don't see a reason why you can't equip them for your deck, for their mercenary deck if you want.
Right.
So there's no reason why not.
In the future, could we see ways to change equipment during the dungeon with some sort of equipment reserves option?
Yeah, and same with decks. Like, all of that stuff is potential options. We actually there was a dungeon we had at one point where it was actually the Sphinx Dungeon, where each Sphinx was going to supply you with a riddle, and you had to answer the riddle. A lot of the standard riddles that you see out there, pulled from various sources.
Right.
You know, but then that was their question riddle, and then their deck building riddle. They would put a deck building rule on you, and in the middle of the dungeon, you were going to have to modify your deck based upon the riddle that they gave you. Like, you can only include even cost cards in your deck. You can only include odd cost cards in your deck.
Wow.
Stuff like that in the middle of the dungeon. We had to tweak that a little bit based on some engineering feedback, but there's no reason why in the future that we can't do that and let you modify things. We want in general things to be pretty much the average game, and the average experience should be pretty straightforward, but we do want to throw you curveballs from time to time, because that makes things interesting and
sure.
makes it, oh, I've never seen this before, oh, this is new and exciting, and we want to give you that. So most dungeons right now, you can't modify anything. You get to bring your mercenary in, and they have their own deck for them, and they function as your reserves, but there's no reason why there shouldn't be a dungeon from time to time that will let you modify your deck for specific reasons, for thematic reasons, via equipment or gems or cards in the middle of the dungeon. But we want to find the right spots to do that, and make sure that it's exciting and fun when it happens.
Is there a chance that we could get PvP playable cards by doing PvE, like maybe some commons and uncommons to help out if you want to like step into that realm?
The current plan is that the only way to get PvP cards is from packs. So there will be PvE cards or the auction house.
You can PvE, sell your PvE stuff.
You'll get gold as you play through the arena, as you play through dungeons, and that will hopefully get players to go to the auction house to buy the singles that they want, the commons and uncommons. And there will be most of the cards in PvE currently are not commons, because blank cards aren't particularly blanks, and one keyword cards and stuff like that aren't particularly exciting to PvE players, I don't think. So we're trying to mostly give you uncommons, rares, and legendaries through PvE that will feel like they go in a deck that you might already have, whether it's a starter deck or it's a piece of a puzzle that maybe doesn't quite get there in PvP, because there's only so many cards we can have in PvP. But we give you an extra piece to that puzzle. For example, the Briar Legion.
Right.
The Briar Legion deck, there's Briar Legion, and there's some cards there's a Briar Patch Conjurer, and then Set 2 has a card that goes with it. But some players might feel that there's not enough there. But in PvE, we can throw you a bone to help that deck out and throw you another plant. There's one actually from the arena that is trying to help that deck for just, because why not? Because we can. There's not enough room for it in PvP, because PvP is trying to serve a lot of masters.
Right.
But PvE is just, hey, what decks exist out there? Okay, we want to give you these cards to help this deck, work a little bit better. Or, hey, what's this thing that doesn't quite get there, but we have enough cards in PvE, but we didn't, or PvP, but we didn't include kind of the glue that it needs. Like, all right, well, here's some glue to help make that deck work.
Right.
And then also, there's a whole new deck from a PvE card that pops up, and there's a whole new deck that comes out because of it. Like, that's
right.
Those are our goals with the PvE cards that we're trying to serve or to make happen.
Right.
So.
What's the tentative release and schedule for PvE content compared to PvP sets? Is there going to be like 3 PvP sets for like 1 PvE like dungeon content, raid content?
That's pretty much still up in the air. We're trying to see how it goes right now. Can't really give any definitive stuff on that. Some of this is feel out, how the first release goes, and how long it takes, how we feel like the PvP sets impact. PvP is on a pretty strict schedule, and eventually we want to be to the point where we're ahead of all of that, and that's the ultimate goal is to be well enough ahead where we don't have those problems, and we can plan PvE and PvP to line up together perfectly. But that's a utopian world, and we have to see how it goes and adjust from there. But there will be plenty of PvE content, and I love the PvE stuff, so I will always be pushing to add more content, and when it's awesome, and when it's when I believe that we need to add it. So
okay. Will PvE content mechanics be paired with PvP block sets?
The goal right now is yes. a lot of the PvE decks have a lot of their own cards, but they're also using cards from the PvP sets. So some of the mechanics that are you know, very prevalent in the PvP sets will be there, and we have to kind of build those decks and some of those themes around the stuff that's going on in PvP. In the future, it's possible that we'll have an entirely own everything for PvE, its own card file, its own set, and we'll pull some cards from PvP here and there, but we don't want PvE to feel like this completely disjointed thing from PvP, doing this completely different thing, because then you feel like you're potentially playing two different games. So imagine a guy who plays PvE, then goes to try to play PvP, expecting certain things to happen or certain mechanics, and it's completely different. We don't want to.
Not as powerful because the PvE stuff can get kind of wacky.
It can, and that's something, you know, a balance concern that we have. It's, you know, if we go too vertical in the power that we give players and how they level up their champion, or how the keep levels up and the account leveling stuff and the cards we give you, you know, it ends up being this situation where once you're max level, you're dropping, you know, 4/4s on turn 1, which is completely different than the PvP game. And we don't want to have this, you know, completely different game, and then when you go to PvP from that, you might be like, this is boring. I'm playing 2-1s and 1-1s. I want to. Where's my 4/4s? So we have to balance out. We have to balance out that, and again, like raids are the spot where we want to be having those like, oh my God, he played the 4/4 on turn 1. What are we supposed to do about that? It's like, well, there's 3 of you. Hopefully you guys can deal with it. But if in PvE you're playing in the dungeon you're playing 4/4s on 1, then the raid boss needs to be dropping 10/10s on turn 1 to make up for that. And then it's like, this isn't even remotely close to the same game anymore. So we're trying to make sure that everything stays in the same, you know,
the same
general balance, scale.
So moving on, will PvE champions ever get changed or errated in the future? Is there a chance that could happen? We see that a lot with like MMOs. Yeah,
if we see something that's pretty degenerate, or you know, we release something into the world. I mean, the PvE stuff's all free, so
like it seems like the PvE is a little bit more easy to target for errata than like PvP. It definitely can't. You know, but at the same time, you could just depreciate collections, certain cards if you do errata.
In a perfect world, obviously we don't want to have to errata anything or ban anything or anything like that.
And you guys have an excellent trade record of not doing that, so fall back on that.
That's the goal. But in PvE, the ultimate underlying thing for me for PvE and hopefully for everyone is fun. And if some cards or champions or anything like that are being degenerate or finding interesting ways around mechanics and letting you farm specifically well in certain dungeons, you know, then we'll have to hit them with the nerf bat and potentially change them up. But you know, just like you see in lots of other video games, like we don't want to ruin the feel of the class or the feel of the talent or the feel of whatever it was. So we'll typically look for spots to keep it with that feel, but you know, hit the power on it a little bit and bring it more in line of what we think is reasonable and still maintains the fun. But you know, there's obviously people out there, when you take away their shiny toy, they get upset.
Obviously. I mean, I remember somebody had told me that some of the devs at Blizzard might have gotten close to getting into a fist fight over a change with the Hunter back when they had like ammo, and they decided to have infinite ammo. After that, they almost got in like a fist fight. So, you know, I can definitely. I mean, you guys are passionate about this. The players are passionate, so I can definitely see that. Next question: will we see new PvE champions in the future? And then, is it like a PvE champion like a race class combination? How does that work out?
So the current plan is when you make your keep, you know, you pick your lord. Well, you have your lord, and as you make your champions, you pick one of the Ardent or Underworld races, and then you pick a class, and that's your champion. That's your first champion. As you unlock more levels of your keep and play the game more, you'll unlock more classes to make other champions. But each champion interacts with the story individually. So as I play my warrior, for example, if I make a warrior, I love warriors. If I make a warrior, and that's my first character.
It's one of my favorites too.
As I play that character, I will unlock new things for the warrior specifically. But then the total like cumulative amount of experience that I accumulate with all of my characters will level up my keep.
Okay.
So as I play my warrior, I'll unlock new stuff for my keep, which then eventually will unlock new classes, new buildings, PVE cards, PVE gems, equipment, the whole shebang bang.
Right. So you just keep building.
You just keep building, and the biggest reason that I push for this system is because that first character, yeah, we want to make you work for what you're going for, but just like in a lot of video games, you see they don't make it as difficult for your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth characters. You still have to go through the story, but in WoW, for example, my main character is a warrior, and once you max out your valor for the week, then it makes it easier to get valor on your other characters, and I can get heirloom gear and send heirloom gear to my other characters that might need a little help. And all those achievements that I earn for mounts and all the cosmetic cool stuff still available to them, so my level 20 druid can look awesome riding around on some mount that he has no business having. But he still has to experience the story and level up on his own, but it's a little easier for him because he gets the heirloom gear that my first character earned. So we're kind of pushing towards that type of system where we don't want to make it too easy for your alts, but we want to not make it as grindy as your first character, because the grind is there for the gear, for the cards, for all of that stuff, and we want you to have fun. So
yeah. Is there going to be a cap on the amount of PvE champions you can have per account? There's 10, right? There's 9 classes, 10 classes?
There's 6 classes right now.
6 classes. So you can probably have at least 6.
You'll get 6. You'll get 6 right now. Like once PvE comes out, you'll get those 6. Any classes that we add on top of that, you'll just basically get more slots for them.
Right.
There's no.
But if you wanted a new race class combination, you already have that class. Now you kind of have to use up another slot.
Yeah, we haven't decided entirely on if it's going to be a system like WoW, for example, or like an RPG where it's you just get an X number of slots and you do whatever you want, or if we're going to say you get one character of each class, and that's how it goes, and that's your character of that class. We haven't really decided on that yet. Again, whatever we determine is the most fun and open for the players, that's what it'll end up being. Some of it's some of it will end up being engineering restrictions and data restrictions. We can't just let you have a million characters, but we'll figure it out. But it hasn't been set in stone exactly how the system's going to work. So.
Right. So, are there plans to allow players to play PvE content while waiting in tournament queues, or for rounds to start?
In a perfect world, yes. We don't want to make people just have to sit there not doing anything. We want you to play the game, and
because we talked about how it was you could save it, you could kind of save your progress.
Yeah, you currently can save your progress is saved after a match is over, after an encounter is over.
So you have to finish.
So you have to finish the encounter first. At some point, maybe in the future, we'll be able to save mid encounter. But right now, your encounter has to be over in order for you to have your dungeon progress saved. But we don't, it's a game. We want you to have fun. We don't want you to be sitting there just in a lobby waiting for people to queue up for a draft, or for constructed queue, or for sealed. We want you playing the game. So whatever we can get you to do to play the game and have fun and not be sitting there idly, that's what we're going to push for.
For sure.
So.
For sure. Will reserves be available in PvE dungeons, between I guess encounters? Or if you fail and you have to redo it.
So the way the mercenaries work right now in dungeons is those are basically function as your reserves. So you have your deck, and then in a dungeon you can sub a mercenary into a fight that you might be having difficulty with, but you build your entire own deck for that mercenary.
Right.
And that's basically functions your reserve. So in PvP you get 15 card reserves. In PvE you get a whole new deck if you want, with a whole new mercenary with a champion power that works in unison with that whole new deck. So so if you have,
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and and part of the thing with the keep leveling also is to unlock more mercenary slots, to the point where you might be able to summon 3 mercenaries in a dungeon, depending on the size of the dungeon, to help you out if your deck's having trouble, or like me, for example, there's probably a handful of decks that I like, and I don't really want to stray too far from those, because those are my wheelhouse. And then it's like, all right, I'm just gonna make a mercenary deck with this other thing and sub him in, because I like my decks and how they function, and different players are different things. That's how I work. Whereas you know, Corey and Ben Soul, for example, they're much more Johnny than I am, and have, you know, love the combos and love all the different types of decks, and we'll probably try to build as many decks as you can. I'm very Timmy. I love big monsters. I love smashing people's faces in with dragons and stuff like that. So I'm a pretty simple guy.
Yeah.
And so I'll have my handful
big cards, big effects.
Big cards, big effects, and I'll have my handful of decks that I like, and just play those, and I'll use Mercenaries to help out on the decks, on, you know, in the fights that I might have problems with.
Right.
So
I think you already answered this, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyways.
Sure.
It says, will different PvE content be available depending on your champion level?
So again, like not all of this is set in stone, but the current plan is your champion will go through the story and unlock dungeons individually for that champion. So your keep level will be a cumulative amount of experience that your champions have earned, but each champion individually has to experience the content for themselves.
Right.
We have talked about an adventure mode. I don't want to go into too much, but that will allow you to use your mercenaries
like
more, and
Diablo 3 adventure mode, something
similar like that. Once you've gone through everything, you know, the story.
It's like pick up and play.
It's pick up and play. Take whatever you want in there and go have fun.
Yeah.
But you know, that's after you've invested the time and gone through the story and earned everything that we want you to earn and experience what you want to experience. But after that, it's, you know, go grind away, have fun, however you want to have fun, sandbox.
Right. Will PvE content gray out, or basically give no XP or no loot, like if you're too powerful for it?
The hope is no. The goal is to, again, like we'll have the ramp up as you play your champion, we'll unlock new dungeons for you as you level up that champion and as you go through the story and all of that. And then the adventure mode stuff will be whatever you've done already, that will be available to you. We're still mulling over whether or not we want to not force you, but, you know, make you do certain things in order to unlock. Like, is it going to be a one-for-one trade-off? If you've done this, now you can do an adventure mode, or do you have to do, or is it in chunks, like or do you have to go through the whole main story?
Content, like Elixir, you had to do the key run.
Yeah. We're still mulling over some of that stuff, but like I said earlier, with one of those first dungeons is, while it might be a starter dungeon or one of the early dungeons, we want to make it so that every dungeon has something that you want from it, whether it's cards, whether it's gear. I mean, you know, equipment's going to be the big draw. So we want legendary equipment and rare equipment available in all of these dungeons. So they will have hard modes and other ways to play them to, you know, ramp up the difficulty on it to make it so that nothing's grayed out for you. Like even the simplest dungeon of the first one I described will still be a challenge. Basically, just on some of those will probably be on sheer, like, now they're playing more powerful cards.
Right.
And some of them will be the hard modes of, like, yeah, you have to go in here with no equipment, or yeah, you have to go in here with only one-ofs in your deck, or whatever we decide is the hard mode way to do things. But we don't want anything grayed out. We want you to be able to play everything, have fun in everything, grind anywhere you want. And,
sure.
And
so will PvE be solo or multiplayer right away, or just be solo? I mean, obviously it's probably going to be solo right away, but like, how far behind it are we going to get that multiplayer experience?
Can't give you exact time frame on that,
right, sure.
But you know, the initial stuff will be solo. The raids are
still
obviously
at 3 people.
Yeah, they're looking at 3 people. A little more challenging, mostly from a UI standpoint. And you know, I worked on World of Warcraft, the card game, for a long time, and have a lot of experience with raids. And one of the things we found, you're sitting there and you're playing a raid in World of Warcraft, was you can easily see, you know, my hand, my buddy's hand, what they have in play, and you can talk to each other and figure it out and get a quick snapshot of, like, okay, here's everything on the board, I got it.
Right.
But in a digital world, how do we display that information to you quickly and easily? You don't have to constantly move the screen around and see everything. Is that something the UI can handle? What's the best way to do it? How do we want to show that to you? Like, that's probably the biggest hurdle for raids at this point. Is mechanics. We've been doing, I mean, I've made something along the lines of 5, I think, of the 8, or worked on 5 of the 8 WoW raids for WoW TCG. And raids, no problem. We've done that a lot. It's the UI and the engineering side of it. Those are probably the biggest hurdles for it. But we obviously want to get the content out as quickly as possible, and we'll not lag it a day longer than we have to. So
obviously, yeah. Will PvE cards or content rotate, like rotate out, rotate in?
it's certainly a possibility. I mean, you know, we want you to be able to use your entire collection and have fun and do whatever you want to do, but it's possible, you know, that we'll have to rotate cards out or sets out. I mean, they might go with the set rotation with PvP sets as PvP sets rotate, but, you know, PvE is a little more open-ended, a little more free-form, so hopefully we'll be able to manage, you know, players being able to do whatever they want, but there potentially will be dungeons, and even, you know, when new dungeons come out, it might be like, oh, you have to use, you know, from this set of cards. And once it's been out for a while, we might then unlock it and say, yeah, go have fun. Or same thing, adventure mode might just be you do whatever you want.
Right.
But as you go through the story that's there, and as everything's relevant at that time, you might have to, you know, use the new stuff, and we might put some restrictions on it. But that's
right.
We'll cross that bridge when
Sure.
you know, farther down the line, you know, when set 5, 6, 7, 8 come out. So
is there any chance that we might see some sort of like map-based tactical combat where like maybe you'll send a champion in one direction to go take a town, maybe you'll send another champion like into a forest to go do something, and like you can play them like once per day or something, anything like that, you think? In the future?
Yeah, we're hoping to you know, explore the space that we have digitally in individual matches and individual encounters. You know, whether it's we turn an encounter into lane combat where, you know, you have to decide exactly where you want to put. You get 3 lanes and you have to put your troops in those lanes.
Champions, yeah,
or three champions, or you know, sometimes decisions you make inside the dungeon will give you a choice. Do you want to go left or right? And you have a buddy with you who has an automated deck, and in some encounters that they'll actually play with you and help you out, but then at some point you need to split and you need to decide, do I want to take the left path? And we'll give you some information. Oh, the left is full of lava and this and that, and the right is, you know, you got to go through a castle, and it's like, well, sounds like lava, you know, there'll be this, potentially this type of thing over there inside the castle. Maybe there's ghosts and zombies and this and that.
So you're saying
how's my deck built for this?
You just said something about an automated deck, like we might have the computer on our side too. Like
yes.
With your own deck. Like,
yes.
This is completely new to me.
We have some dungeons currently that are again, like, you know, this is, hopefully this stuff will make it, but, you know, we're
right. Everything's in flux. You never
but
know.
But there are some dungeons that have you make some friends and they play some decks with you. You know, we want to give you. We don't want every single dungeon to feel the same. It's just you versus somebody else. And like, you know, if you have characters that you meet along the way, like, we want you to remember them. We want you to see them multiple times. We want you to, and even then, later down the line, the line, when we make a PvP card out of them, like, oh man, I remember that guy. He was awesome.
Yeah.
He helped me beat up, you know, so and so, and his deck was awesome, and this is great. So that's the type of, you know, we want to have those characters that are as famous and popular as they are in League of Legends and in World of Warcraft. You want to see people
cosplaying them.
Yes.
Pretty much. I mean,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, we already got the Princess Corey cosplay last year at GenCON. We want more of that. We want someone coming as Zoltag. We want someone dressing up as Ozawa. We want, you know, Gabriel. We want all of that stuff.
Yeah. How long do you think? What's the target for people to level up? Like a month, 2 months? Like the average player is going to put in like 2 hours a day, something like that. Somewhere in there.
Those numbers are, again, like, all this stuff is up in the air about what exactly, how long we want it to take. Like, we're still not finalized on how many levels there are going to be, how many class levels there are, how many keep levels there are. But we don't want to make it, you know, we want to make sure there's enough content there for a guy who's playing a lot, but we also don't want to make it seem so out of reach to get to max level for a casual guy who can only play, you know, for a couple hours a week.
Right.
So, you know, it's trying to balance. It's the fine line of, like,
make it good, but not too grindy.
Yeah, and because you know, you look at some of the MMOs out there now, like WoW, for example, is on, you know, level 100 and stuff is coming out with Warlords of Draenor. If you're a new guy and you're like, oh my God, I have to level up 100 times, and they found their.
They changed the XP rates.
They do, and
still.
that's something we can do. You know, 5 years, 6 years from now. You know. But right now, I mean, we're still fine tuning the balance of, you know, how quickly are you going to get stuff. You know, how long should you have to play in order to get all of this, and at the end of the day, you know, there will be plenty to do at max level in terms of, you know, grinding getting all your equipment, getting all your cards, maxing out all the character classes, unlocking all the stuff at the keep level, yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of stuff to do.
There'll be plenty to do.
So one of the popular things with a certain crowd, I mean, it's a pretty small crowd. I'm one of these people. They love hardcore mode. Is there any chance we can make a champion and make him a hardcore character where if he dies,
he's done.
He's done.
Ben Stoll, the lead PvP designer, loves that stuff. Chris Woods loves that stuff. Me personally, I don't like that stuff because I feel terrible when that happens. So I'm not. I play roguelikes from time to time, and then I feel awful when it reminds me that I've passed on my lineage, like in Infinity Blade, for example. Like, oh, I died 30,000 times, and this is my, you know, I'm in the year 1,000,000 because I couldn't beat the end boss until now. But eventually, that's certainly something we could do. There's no reason why not. If it's something the audience wants, the community wants, and we think it'll be fun and offer you something different than everything else, there's no reason why that couldn't be a thing. And there are the hardcore players in the office that love that stuff.
Right.
So
this is kind of a lot. We kind of already covered this, but like, how much communication would you say there is between the PvE and the PvP teams? I mean, you guys obviously aren't in you have your own areas, I'm guessing.
Nope.
No.
We all sit in the same general area because we all like, there's a PvE team and then there's a PvP team, but it's pretty, like, you know, we only have so many people, you know, on the team right now, and you know, this is a big project, so obviously we all spend time on everything. Like,
all right, so
you know, there's
a lot of communication.
There's a lot of communication.
Because I remember last year, like, Chris was talking to me, he's like, oh, if I design this one card, it could screw the whole dungeon, and so we really kind of need to, you know, even a PvP card could screw PvE. You know?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the relentless corruption is an issue.
Good
Even like counter magic, when you have three players playing counter magics, and if we release more interrupts and stuff like that, like
uncounterable stuff. But
we can. We don't want to, because that's, if we can avoid it, we don't want to. I would rather have something be a little more organic, like, you know, if when this troop goes to the graveyard from anywhere, it has an effect, and it's, you know, something that you potentially want to counter. But you have to then decide, is it worth it for me to counter this?
Right.
Would I rather have it in play, or do we want to get rid of it, but then it's going to have this devastating effect on us when it goes to the graveyard?
Or if this card is countered, it just goes back to their hand. Maybe.
Yeah, so stuff like that. You know, there's a dungeon that's actually full of robots, and it's there's a Slaughter Gear dungeon and a Slaughter Gear raid. But Total Meltdown, for example, is completely just destroys everything. So it's trying to figure out, well, we don't want to ban any cards in raids and dungeons if we don't have to. If we have to go down that road, we will. If we don't want players ruining their own fun. But we'd rather have organic kind of woven in. If you want a Total Meltdown, and like maybe, for example, the Slaughter Gear will have an artifact that starts in play that says when this specific artifact is destroyed, you know, you take 10 damage. And it's like, well, if you need to wipe the board with a Total Meltdown because he's got too many robots out, you can, but you're going to take 10 because this thing is going with it.
Right.
Or you can pick your spots and individually get rid of stuff. But so we'd rather have organic mechanics that are woven into stuff and then make players have to decide, do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? Then, you know, make cards uncounterable, and we're probably going to have to from time to time, but we'd like to have organic solutions to these problems that then put the onus on the player to solve that puzzle for them, and not just, well, the card answered it for you, you're not allowed to do that.
Sure. Yeah, we're on the last page of questions.
All right.
It's like question marathon. We're almost there. The unlimited tournament stress tests crashed the servers, which we kind of expected. Will we be seeing some hardware upgrades along with the new interface and set 2 that's coming? Will we be seeing any new hardware? Is that necessary?
I don't think I looked at this page of questions. I do not have an answer for that one.
Okay, all right. Well, I think that we might just cut it off here then.
Okay.
And you know, I'd just like to say thanks to Drew Walker for taking time out. I mean, we spent about an hour on this interview, and Drew's just a great guy. If you guys haven't seen him, or if you know, I mean, just say hi to him at the cons. Really appreciate him, and of course the entire team. Make sure as you guys are getting out there playing Hex, checking it out, and supporting them. We're gonna get PVE soon. They promised it to us. We're going to see it soon. So just keep an eye out for it, and encourage your friends to get out there and play the game. So until next time, this is Aaron Squire signing off, saying God bless you and your families, and try not to rage too much out there. Walker, you can say something.
Thanks a lot for all the support from the community. PvE is going to be awesome. We wanted to get it to you as quickly as we can, so we're doing our best. Thanks for playing. Thanks for the interview. A lot of fun.